as far as the new enrollees, the guys that have come here this summer. Obviously, the first day there's not a whole lot going on, and you guys don't get a ton of opportunity to really show out. But was there anybody amongst that group that you were able to get an eye on that maybe looked impressive, or they looked more ready to go than maybe you would have expected?
No, I don't necessarily class because it's tough with the new enrollees. There's only three of them,
Yeah,
and so I kind of have to classify the freshman group as a whole because we only have in terms of new players to see. It's Tucker Caddis, it's Makai Williams Lee, and Juju Preston,
yeah,
and Preston's hurt right now, so it really is two. And so I try to classify this whole group, and I think a guy that I watched in the spring that I just kind of noted down as okay, there's something here. And I try not to do the low hanging fruit of obviously we could talk about Davidson to death. We could talk about Amari Adams. We could talk about Braden Jacobs and just the hulking figure that he is. Man, someone that I'm incredibly high on. Probably not going to start this year just because Tristan Lee is going to command that left tackle spot. And Jacobs, technically, there's some technical stuff that I would like to see improve there. But I'm really high on a guy like Gavin Blanchard. There's just something to it. The flip from UCF, watched a few reps from him today and just noted down on I've got my notes somewhere here, but I just noted looks faster from the spring. And it's just the quick feet, the burst off of the line. Got a lot of praise from Matt Luke today where really got him fired up. And I think there's something with this offensive line group that maybe it's Matt Luke installed, but I've only seen so many of these practices. There's just a lot of talking. And it's a lot of from Lee, from some of the older guys, Blake Miller, Linthicum. There's a lot of chatter between them. And it's a lot of recommending how to do maybe this type of rep, maybe this technique works better. And so it's just sort of stemmed from a guy like Luke who feels like he's running at 100 miles an hour. And it's all we talk about it with Tom Allen. It sort of reflects the coaching. The coach reflects sort of the position group or the defense or the offense. And I think Matt Luke has kind of characterized this group, and it's really fed off into the freshmen that guys like Blanchard, guys like Jacobs had Matt Luke boot camp in the spring and really had to get their feet thrown to the fire due to injuries. And he was just someone that I don't see him probably being a guy that plays this year, but maybe a year in the crock pot. I could really see that Clemson's might have found something that the rest of the country perhaps didn't at the time.
yeah. Wow, and that was not a name I was going to expect from you, but yeah. I mean, Gavin Blanchard, yeah, and he's not a guy we spent a ton of time talking and has gotten a ton of love or really any sort of attention. Um, and that goes to show. I mean, kind of the evaluation, the just the eye for talent that Matt Luke has. And like you said, a late flip from UCF, you don't really know what you're getting out of him. He did have some decent offers, but at the end of the day, he just didn't have the same kind of gravitas that Braden Jacobs had, who got a ton of love from the recruiting services. Pretty much universally, anybody you talk to, they felt pretty confident that he was going to be a guy that was going to come in more ready to go than most freshman tackles. But yeah, that was an interesting name. And speaking to Matt Luke, like, and this group in general, this this has to be one of the better groups in terms of depth that I think Clemson has had. I mean, when you look at the amount of guys that can play multiple positions, the amount of guys that have found their way into the depth, found their way into the rotation at different points, the guys that can play multiple positions at a high level, that have real NFL projectable metrics. Do you think this especially this second team group, because I think that's what I'm most interested in right now, do you think they'll be able to take that next step and play to a level where you feel confident if one of your guys goes out, you feel like you have answers, especially when you have guys that have played with injuries in your starting lineup. Walker Parks, he certainly dealt with injuries throughout his career. And do you think this group is ready to take that next step based on one practice? I want you to make an overarching takeaway for this group.
Bold predictions July 31st for this group, but
Yeah,
I do. I do. I think it's something Sweeney said today that was fascinating was he feels like he's got 7 guys right now that could start. And I think the way he sort of the way he answered the question made it sound like he wants to play all 7 during a game. So maybe on a drive where, let's say Colin Sadler, who was in that first team group today, let's say he's maybe a little gassed. The offense scores, defense gets a quick pick, and maybe he's not ready to go just yet. Well, they throw in Elijah Thurman there, who I thought looked great today as well. Someone who just had a devastating injury, feels like mere months ago with
Oh, yeah.
that part in Pittsburgh. Someone that Clemson's really high on, Sweeney's really high on, goes in there and can be that plug and play guy. And you don't feel like there's going to be a drop off. So I do think second group, I would probably go more towards, I would probably say 7 as well right now. I'd probably put Thurman and Sewell as your 2 extra starters. But maybe there's someone like a Braden Jacobs who you feel like could be an 8 after 3 more weeks during fall camp. Maybe there's someone like a Rowan Byrne or an Easton Ware that can take that next step. It's going to really come down to, like you had kind of mentioned, these are the building blocks. And that was why that spring was so important. So when we get to talk to some of these linemen, that's going to be one of my main questions is how important was that spring where you kind of get your rear kicked a little bit, but you're coming out. I think everyone's seen that Clemson promo where Will Helt takes Braden Jacobs and just clobbers him into the ground. And you're like, okay, that's kind of your welcome to college football moment.
Yeah.
But still, you turn it weeks later in the spring game. And I got a great story where my brother's at the game and he's like, who's 74? And he's trying to text me. And I go, well, that's Braden Jacobs. That's a freshman. He goes, that's not a freshman. Like, stop lying to me. There's no way. And so you just have these monstrous figures that Matt Luke has acquired and has done really honestly one of the best jobs I've ever seen in terms of an assistant recruiting at such a high level where there's so many schools, especially now with NIL. And I hate to kind of go off on a tangent there on the side, but ultimately, I do think that, and I think depth matters with an extended playoff. We're going to be playing 16, 17 games. We watched Georgia last year with injuries and that quarterfinal get pulverized
Oh,
by
yeah.
Notre Dame. It was very apparent early on that, these guys can't hang with the Fighting Irish, which usually is the opposite with some Notre Dame teams that we've associated in those playoff matchups. So I do think that Clemson's got an edge in that category, and that's really going to benefit them because at some point there's going to be an injury. That's just the nature of the position. So I do have confidence that some guys on that lineup, they're going to play a lot and they're going to rotate. And not only can serve well for keeping guys in-house for the offseason and just that development overall.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a paradigm shift in a lot of ways because I think so much of why Clemson has kind of taken the steps back it has in the last few years is when they've played, especially when they've gotten into these playoff type situations, not necessarily playoff games, but teams that are capable of playing at a playoff level. When you're playing Georgia, when you're playing Tennessee in the Orange Bowl, when you're playing Texas last year, like the teams that truly recruit at the highest level, especially on the defensive line, you just haven't been able to hold up. And it was apparent. I mean, that Texas game, I don't think the offensive line played poorly, but they certainly got they certainly lost their fair share of reps, and Cade was under pressure. I think they settled in that second half, and especially that fourth quarter. But you have to be able to play with these guys for 4 quarters if you're going to be what the media is hyping you up to be, what internally I think they believe they can be. You have to have that level of talent on the offensive line, and and you have to have the body types. I think this is the most different Clemson has looked in terms of body type on the line in quite some time. You just, even during the championship seasons, you never had guys that you felt, too many guys that you felt confident were going to be true like NFL mainstays, and of course that's reflected in Dabo Sweeney's draft numbers at that position. I think he's had how many? 3, 4?
Yeah, it's not much.
Yeah, it's been pretty putrid, and no first rounders. I think the closest was Jackson Carman, and so like I think from a body type standpoint, it very much looks different. You have a lot of guys that you feel like, especially some of the younger guys that you feel 2, 3, 4 years down the road will be true NFL draft picks. And of course, I think Blake Miller has a chance to really make himself some money this year, and I think that could go a long way in recruiting. So it really does feel different from that regard too.